Hi everyone, I'm Effie Gale. Today let's talk about 17 types of stories or story elements that are hard sells to pro science fiction and fantasy short fiction publishers. I thought that this would be something a bit fun and interesting and different to do today because when I'm on publishers' websites, every so often I'll see lists that are called things like hard sells or stories we see too often. And I was wondering whether the things that are on those lists, whether they're very specific to those publishers or whether multiple publishers would have the same kind of things on their hard sells list. Are there patterns? Are there things that keep showing up again and again, or are they very much individual to that publisher? That hard sell list or the stories we see too often list, they're not saying that you absolutely cannot submit that content to that market. They'll still potentially consider it, but if you've included X in your story and X is on that hard sell list, then they're going to be less likely to accept your story than if you hadn't included X at all. Either because they see X a lot and they're kind of sick of it and it's really hard to impress them if you have a story about X, or it's just not to their taste in general. And if you have a story about something that's on their hard sell list or their stories we see too often list, it either has to be a really fresh and unique take on that thing, or it has to be just an extraordinary story in general that will blow them away and that they love despite having something on their hard sell list. So it's not a we will take it because we love this thing, it's a we'll take it even though it has this thing. So I'll give you some context as to how I arrived at this list of 17 hard sells to pro science fiction and fantasy short story publishers. I did a couple of searches through Duotrope. I did only pro markets, only markets that accepted short stories. So I believe Duotrope defines that as between 1,000 and 7,500 words. So the market would have to accept stories somewhere in that word range. I filtered only by fantasy and science fiction markets. And I made sure that I wasn't only including markets that were open right now. So as long as they're an active market, even if they're temporarily closed, they would have come up in this search. For the purposes of this list, I wasn't interested in anthologies and contests, so I ignored those, but I opened up everything else and looked through their submissions guidelines and around their website to see if I could see anything like a list of hard sells, tough sells, difficult sells, things that we see too much of, things that we were sick of. Anything in those general categories I have included in this analysis. And then it was a matter of seeing what stories or what story elements were coming up multiple times across multiple publishers. There were actually fewer markets with hard sell lists than I was anticipating. If I was a short fiction publisher, I would definitely have a hard sell list, just to let people know in advance that they can still try me with this kind of story, but I'm less likely to like it and I'm less likely to accept it, either just as a matter of personal taste or because I've been oversaturated with that kind of story or story element in the past, so I'm less likely to want to buy it. The markets that I ended up finding the hard sell list for and that I'm using for this video are Augur, Cast of Wonders, Clark's World, Cosmic Roots and Eldritch Shores, Frozen Wavelets, Little Blue Marble, and Strange Horizons. So for a story type or story element to be on this list of 17, my list for this video, it had to be called out by multiple publishers. So it's not just one market saying this in particular is a hard sell for us. You can start to see a bit of a pattern because it's come up again. And the items on this list, they're not in any particular order. They're not ranked aside from the very last one, which will be number 17, which was by far the most popular item to be on people's hard sell lists. And I would be very interested if you had any guesses as to what that is in advance. Leave it in the comments. I would love to hear what you're thinking. I should also say that some of these items are word for word matches between the different hard sell lists and others are not exact matches, but they were close enough that I felt comfortable grouping them for this video for us to get a sense of what those hard sells were as a pattern, and I'll make it pretty clear where there might be some variation in the exact things that are causing markets to see things as hard sells. So without any further ado, let's get to 17 hard sells to pro science fiction and fantasy short fiction publishers. Number 1 is zombies or zombie wannabes. So they're either less interested in zombies full stop, or they're less interested in anything to do with zombies. If it's zombie-esque, if it's zombies by any other name, if it reminds them of zombies, they're less interested. And zombie wannabes is their phrasing, not mine. Number 2 is werewolves or wanton werewolves. So they're either less interested in werewolves full stop, or they're less interested in lustful werewolves, hot werewolves, anything to do with werewolves and being attractive, they're less interested in it. Number 3 is RPG adventures or D&D characters. So anything that feels like it might have come from your tabletop campaign or your Dungeons and Dragons time is going to be a harder sell for some markets. Number 4 is superheroes. And this is either superheroes in general or a couple of particularly common superhero tropes. And the ones that are called out here are the superpowered narrator claiming that superhero stories never address the mundane problems that superheroes would actually run into in the real world, or kids with special abilities are kidnapped by the government and imprisoned and tested in a lab. Number 5 is despair or hopelessness. So either that kind of overwhelming feeling coming through the story, or that sense that things are never going to be able to get better for a character or a world or a situation. Number 6 is a bit similar, and it's suicide, suicide ideation, or suicide themes. And I get the impression that for at least one of these markets, it's because they want to be very careful about what they're exposing their readership to. Number 7 is a post-apocalyptic setting or a desert dystopia. Markets feel like they've seen this a lot before, and it is a hard sell for them. Number 8 is gratuitous gore or splatter. And I will highlight the word gratuitous here, because if it doesn't feel overdone and it feels necessary to the story, it no longer becomes a hard sell. Number 9 is vignettes, or often just a description of a place. If you're not familiar with the term vignette, that's usually used to describe just a description of something. So either a character or a location or a snapshot of that character's life, but it's not a story as we would usually use the term story in the Western world. Number 10 is body shaming, or fatness used to signal that a character is evil. They're not saying that 100% of your fat characters have to be explicitly good, but what they have an aversion to is fatness being used as a shortcut to signal some kind of moral failing in a character. Number 11 is a certain political party takes over the world. That can either have wonderful consequences or horrible consequences, but either way, it tends to be a harder sell. Number 12 is anthropomorphism, and especially called out here are talking cats and talking swords. Number 13 is the plot centering around a bad person doing bad things, and or rapists, murderers, child abusers, cannibals. This is not to say that you can't have those elements in your story, but when it becomes the point of the plot, that's when it can start to become a hard sell. Number 14 is space travel is easy and or it will solve everything. And a particular example used here was faster than light travel, and if that was shown to be as easy as it is depicted in a lot of TV shows and movies. And if it was that easy, that became a harder sell. Number 15 is an unnamed character turns out to be God and or God saves the world. So for example, for the former, the toy that the character is playing with or the project they've been working on turns out to be Earth or the universe. And at this point, I realized that the word processing software that I had been using to keep track of this list was actually a little bit off, and there were 16 items on the list rather than 17. So I apologize for any confusion there. The last item on this list, and the one that is by far the most popular for people to put on their hard sells list, is in fact number 16. And that number 16 is vampires, or sexy vampires, as one market called out specifically. That was definitely the item that came up the most on people's hard sell lists, and there was a specific trope that was mentioned as well, which is in a comedic / satirical story, vampires and or other supernatural creatures come out publicly and demand and or get the vote and other rights, but people are prejudiced against them. And this was interesting to me because I have not personally felt overexposed to that trope in particular compared to a lot of other vampire tropes, but that was one that was mentioned specifically, so I thought that was useful to note. So that was 16 hard sells to pro science fiction and fantasy short fiction publishers. Was there something on this list that surprised you, or something you were expecting to see and were surprised didn't come up? For me, I was surprised that there wasn't anything about monsters under people's beds, because I see quite a few stories being published about that, and also I hear it's just rampant in submissions that publishers get. So I was surprised not to see that on here. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to see similar content, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.